A wind-up statement concerning relations, spontaneously, without preparation, just the relations listed. Well, starting with the family. In general, I believe that my family could have gone into the agreement of sacrificing me. Basically, the situation is I was always this wonderful child, no problems at school, excellent pupil, an excellent pupil or a very good pupil, but in relation that was excellent. And generally born quite rich, richer than the rest. So this is a factor too. In other words, I do sense a certain Schadenfreude. So this is a general comment on my family, including distant relatives. As far as my mom and my dad are concerned, I had no knowledge about my dad's life, but I am still proud of the way he was bringing me up, because he was bringing me up to be a princess, and thanks to that I treated other people like princes and princesses, and this is the order of life I like. As for my mom, apart from the love, which is very important because that gives one a sense of emotional security at this early stage of development. So later, when I was a teenager, perhaps we had quarrels, disagreements, generation gap, and personality. Not really mismatch, but differences in personality, or maybe not in personality, but in attitudes. Still, as the most important time is filled with love, care, tenderness. So this is for life. And her line of upbringing was pretty much determined by duty. So it's very good too. As for my step-family, I personally believe that my mom ruined my life by marrying Piotr Rubanek. And perhaps I won't elaborate on the issue. The most important people are certainly my grandma, that is my mother's mom, my aunt, my mother's sister, and my uncle, her husband. When I was a child, my aunt and my uncle were taking care of me, and then they went to Sweden to move to Canada and stay there. As a teenager, I still had a very positive attitude to my aunt, but I think that it was the time when she started liking me less. And then when I was in my 20s at the university, I think that I became critical of her, and she didn't like it. So there was a gap growing. I had a very good contact with my uncle, or so I thought. I believe he was trying to turn me into a Scientologist. So this was not really the relation between us, but the relation between him and a prospective Scientologist. I do not believe he was honest. As for my cousins, this is a total disaster. That is Diana and Alan. I believe they are guilty in that tragedy. So this is the first group, family. The second group is school, I mean education. As for the primary school, I believe that my friends, my mates, generally were rooted in the communist culture. They were probably the children of communist parents. And I was not. So the germs of the conflict that has developed in time was on then. Perhaps we did not have that much in common, but we had quite a lot of common activities. Playing volleyball together, church going, well, school as such, obviously. And as far as church going is concerned, additional activities that we could practice in church, like well, not in church, in the church, not in church, not as part of the observances, but playing table tennis and discotheques. So the time we spent together was devoted to specific activities. There were some pupils of my, well, at least of the comparable level in terms of intellectual capacity in my class, I think. But not of the genius. And I believe it true. So the meeting after years, especially when I had problems resulting from different from contacts in different environments, then indeed there was this sense of satisfaction, I believe, about how successful they have been in life and how much problems I have had. Not that all were of this ill attitude or ill-willed attitude. I believe my best friend from the primary school was not. But then it's not accidental that we did not meet as those close friends. So I believe that the differences were huge, and that is the problem that made all possible gossip and lies seem real and true to them. The sense of expectations for seeing me fail, simply seeing me fail in life, seeing me not honorable, ignoble, and finally despicable. So this is the primary school. Then the secondary school, which was an elite school, comprehensive school, specializing in teaching foreign languages. Well, there the level was more or less the same. Not all people not all pupils applied to learning, so it needs to be taken into account. It showed at the university level, where some started doing really well, but I also have a sense of being more able, and the reason why I think so is them going into specializations, and perhaps there are more professional in the specializations, but then they do not have the spectrum, and out of the spectrum result attitudes and general conduct in life. It has an impact on decision making, etc. So I can believe that them having their contacts quite high right now. Some on the executive positions, some on the managerial ones, well, some at the academic level. All in all, I believe that they might have decided, they might have come together and decided to sacrifice their ROIC. I think there is an element of hidden competition of which I had never been aware. Many of them are communist children too. So at this level it becomes political, where it goes down the hierarchy. Whether the people are aware of it or not. And then at this level also, I think, appears this gap, the gap between the idealist that I have always been and the pragmatic person. So here we start talking about becoming horse, rotten compromises, and a few other things that accompany it. So perhaps they did not really want me to end in such a tragedy, but I think that it's very probable they wanted to teach me a lesson. As for the university, this is a different community because this is English philology, and I didn't see the competition there, although it might have been, but not in my, not among the people I was close to. But still, I believe it's possible that one of the persons I considered to be my best friend was actually covertly not only thinking but saying all sorts of things about me and my way of life, my attitudes. So I think that maybe at this level of tragedy she would become, she would have some kind of awakening of asking herself, Jesus Christ, I have been taking part in a murder, which is probably not her normal level. But I do believe that she had the Schadenfreude. So this is something about friendship, isn't it? And I also believe that, as for others, they did forward the argument of arrogance. And I believe that they did have some fun at my addressing politicians, for instance. Who does she think she is? And this has to do with the attitudes to life and the consistent conduct in life. Do I regret the time I devoted to working for other students as the representative? I must say that in a way I do regret the commitment, because right now, when I have been deprived of my privacy and the conditions for study, I wish I had not been involved in any conflict whatsoever. I mean, just to spend the time studying and benefiting from it. And now having my home, my peace and quiet, and writing books. But on the other hand, well, I did learn negotiations and mediation. And I know that I'm good at it, even though all signs in heaven and on earth seem to prove it's otherwise. As for teachers, I have always loved my teachers. I had a totally different attitude to teachers than the attitude I have been confronted with. But perhaps it's, as I was saying, I had a totally different attitude from the attitude my pupils had. I think it is best captured by the attitude to Gombrowicz's Ferdydurkę, which obviously was to be absurd, but absurd is also taking some phenomena to the extreme. So the presupposition is that the phenomena do exist. And it is completely insane for me to think about pupils and teachers as opposing teams. Teachers have always been one team with me, and we were united in this effort to become competent. Obviously, not all our relations were about learning only. There was some socializing and emotional development, but generally it would have never come to my head to think about the teacher as my opposition, even if I raised some points, because I was the person who would speak up, but it was never, well, now I'm dealing with my enemy. It was always, well, there's something wrong in what we have here. So I had a friendly attitude to my teachers, and with some I had even closer relations in emotional terms. Not to confuse it with my being in love with my English teacher, of course, because it's different, but normal relations between people. Still, from the perspective of time, I must say that I do believe that teachers might have sacrificed me too, shockingly enough. And as for the primary school, I was at the top. But you know, they might have had better relations with other children's parents, for instance. Some of them working for the communist system, for instance. And I was also quite withdrawn and suppressed as a primary school girl. So my talents did not show. It was literature, grammar in Polish, and mathematics. And volleyball, of course. But not in other school subjects. As for the other school subjects, I just learned the lesson and, delivered it later. Plus the problem with Russian, when I stood up to protest against the obligatory membership in the Association of Friendship between Poland and the Soviet Union in the 5th grade, so I was 12 years old. In the secondary school, I felt quite loved, and I loved my teachers. So this is not the level of liking, this is a level of loving. But I believe that might have agreed that Agnieszka Reg is the person to sacrifice to, even though I was offered a job in the school, the English teacher position, before I started my university studies, even after passing my test. I had the qualification from the Cambridge exam, passed with A. I was boasting about the honor for years. And recently I realized that it might have been the offer that with the intention of making me a rubbish bin already then. But perhaps I shouldn't be so skeptical about all the people from the communist regime too. Perhaps it was quite friendly. As for the university, not all professors were brilliant, which is probably why they underappreciated me. And this is my final decision on the professors. So I do believe that they might have had sacrificed me. Right now, even when I'm speaking, I'm pretty sure that some might be listening if they were to listen. And for the English philologist and the English, she's making a lot of mistakes. And the language is not that imposing either. Which reflects the overall attitude, I believe. I think that the best evidence for the underappreciation is no one actually making the point of me continuing my academic career to become the PhD, which is shocking because, again, there is this pattern thinking and the genius. I believe my claiming the genius might have been one of the reasons why one of the professors did not answer my message including my interpretation of Frosted Midnight after years. The first interpretation I made which also tells me something about the person. I mean, considering the tragedy unfolding and it being uncertain if I will be able to do whatever next day. I don't understand the scope of inhumanity. But you know, this is the people, and I believe that there's some herd spirit in it. So let it be. All the same, I have got my Jagiellonian University education with that degree, and it needs to be emphasized that the only, perhaps not the only, but it is thanks to the education that I was able to write this interpretation. So let us be fair. I believe that at least one of my favorite professors did take part in creating the tragedy. One connected to the fashion world through her daughter, and one connected to the Assangist movement through her contacts in the science environment. Shocking as it is, it does seem true. As for my relations with my pupils, when I became a teacher, oh yeah, I forgot to mention the comprehensive school, the secondary school teacher making the career. Though I believe that he took part in the ridicule exercised by the civic platform. Honestly, I do. You know, the socializing thing. So, you know, this is, I mean, you know, considering him being my history teacher, this is a complete disaster. As for my relations with my pupils, you know, if my love when I was the teacher was unreturned, I wouldn't have loved them so. Had been unreturned, I wouldn't have loved them so much. I have realized it. So it has changed in time. They say that they have become mature, and now they can judge situations. They can evaluate, you know, all the aspects. I have a sense of superiority because it comes from what you have given and from what you have been given. And generally, I also know that if I had devoted that time to self-development rather than investment in other people, I would be on a totally different position now. I regret the involvement in teaching, but on the other hand, now I can claim I'm an expert. Well, the numbers of hours I did were the number of hours worked is definitely not the 5 years, but the 15 at least, or 20. Right, it's about the quality. Well, the quality was superb. all the same, even the 5 are not documented, so I will have problems with getting the pension money. But it's hardly probable I will live to reach the age.